Ethan, I just had dinner at Aurelia in Chicago. Tell me, since when did your father's legacy start tasting like a reheated lie? Alistair Finch's voice wasn't loud, wasn't harsh, and wasn't meant to wound. But each word landed in Ethan's ear like a blade sliding down his spine, cold, sharp, and precise, just like Alistair had always been. Outside the 64th floor office window, the Manhattan sunset spilled gold across skyscraper glass like glaze over a ruined cake, beautiful but rotten. Ethan sat frozen phone pressed to his ear, eyes fixed on a framed cover on the wall, Forbes Ethan Cole, the Midas of Cuisine. The glass reflected his face, perfectly styled hair, square jaw, a charcoal gray bespoke suit, clinging to the physique of a CEO. But inside he saw something else, a ghost wearing a golden mask. Alistair wasn't a critic. He was the final voice from a father now gone. The man who once stood in a blazing kitchen, taught Ethan 10 times how to smell burnt oil and 100 times how to spot a polished liar. The call ended with a short sigh. Ethan lowered his hand. The room stayed silent, but it felt like someone had shattered an entire glass ceiling above his head. He walked over to the frame and took it off the wall. For a few seconds, the Forbes cover was no longer a symbol of success. It was evidence. A trace of betrayal, not by others, but by himself. He threw it into the trash. The glass cracked, splintering into warped reflections. His face lay scattered across jagged shards like a painting slashed down the middle. The bottom drawer opened with a soft, metallic click. Not for a contract. Not for a noir-style pistol. Ethan pulled out his father's old wristwatch, the glass face cracked like veins across a scar. On the back, a Latin inscription, Veritas in sapore, truth in flavor. The hour hand had long stopped ticking, but in that moment, it began to count backward. Preston Vance, Regional Operations Director, still delivered weekly reports like clockwork. All metrics are green. Customer satisfaction is rising. The numbers looked as polished as a Michelin menu, but now they felt like icing on a spoiled cake. Ethan recalled one line in the most recent report: ingredient costs down 12% with no impact on quality. Back then he felt proud. Now he felt sick. He didn't sleep that night. Coffee wasn't enough. Tower lights weren't enough. He walked out of the penthouse, leaving behind walnut floors, growth strategy blueprints, and self-congratulatory echoes. His father's battered Ford F-150 sat in a suburban garage, buried under dust and cobwebs. A faded flannel shirt hung over the driver's seat, jeans with worn knees and cracked leather boots, like relics from a dream of a man who once cooked for factory workers in the dead of winter. Ethan put the clothes on, not as a disguise, as a shedding of skin. He let the beard grow in masking the CEO's features. He left New York at 4 a.m., no laptop, no assistant, no dossiers, just his father's watch, a phone with no SIM card, and a question echoing like a curse. Was your legacy ever real? Through the dust-smeared windshield, the golden lights of Aurelia in Chicago gleamed like a gemstone trapped in plastic, sparkling but fake. Ethan parked across the street. He didn't go in. He just sat there like a ghost from the past, motionless, expressionless. But his eyes had already begun peeling back the porcelain glaze from this perfect-looking shell. The question was no longer, what's gone wrong? It was, when did I let it rot? And that was when Leo, not Ethan Cole anymore, began his mission. The metal door at the back of the restaurant creaked open with the groan of a hinge that had never seen oil. The first scent that hit Ethan wasn't fresh-baked bread or rich brown sauce. It was the faint sting of bleach, the cling of old grease and something heavier, like the stench of surrender. He lowered his head and stepped into the darkness where flickering fluorescent lights trembled like the weak breath of a system nearing collapse. His uniform, a thin gray shirt, coarse work pants, a sagging hairnet, no one looked twice. His name was Leo, his file a blurred photocopy, forged signature, non-existent address. But the eyes were real, and those eyes were collecting everything. Beyond the wall, Aurelia's dining room unfolded like a lacquer painting. Candlelight shimmered in vintage glass jars, crisp white linens pressed to perfection. Violin notes as thin as spider silk floated from ceiling speakers. A gilded world. But one step into the kitchen, and that illusion was crushed by clanging steel pans, voices raised over heat, and the panicked rhythm of people chasing something long lost. He appeared on cue like a model stepping out of a Swiss watch ad. Preston Vance, regional director, a hell god draped in a deep charcoal Italian suit. Not a wrinkle, not a drop of sweat. His words glided like a breeze over still water, but always left a cut behind. "We don't have passengers here," he said to a new cook, his tone like teaching a child to swim in a storm. "Only crew. Either row the boat or drift." Ethan stood in the shadows, watching. At the salad station, a girl with tied-back black hair worked silently, her face pale, but her eyes sharp like a paring knife. Elena Ramirez. No one introduced her. Some people don't need an introduction. She moved like a dancer on a burning stage, each motion calculated for survival. When Preston passed by and made a cutting remark about her speed, she didn't respond. She simply clenched the serrated knife tighter, her fingertips whitening with tension. The oldest man in the kitchen was a crumbling boulder beneath the weight of years, Samuel Sam Jones. His hands were raw bare, still lifting steel pots twice his strength. But he didn't complain. No one helped. He just worked. To Ethan, the man needed no crown, only a pair of rubber gloves which this place had forgotten to give him since some long-lost winter. Ethan began collecting evidence not with a phone but with memory. He saw cheap olive oil poured into imported bottles, labels swapped like sleight of hand. Salmon already discolored had its charred edges trimmed and was glossed with oil, a final makeup on a smiling corpse. Leftover wine was gathered, mixed, corked, and relabeled select. No one spoke. No one stopped. And in that silence, Ethan heard more than words ever could. A loud thud. A steak hit the floor. The cook nearby glanced around, picked it up, rinsed it under a tap, and laid it back on the grill. Ethan stood 3 steps away. No one looked at each other, but they all knew. That night, Elena checked a tray of branzino freshly delivered. The skin was pale, the eyes clouded like fog in a graveyard. Without hesitation, she dumped the entire tray into the trash. Preston arrived in under 20 seconds. No one called him. It was as if he could smell money being thrown away. He just stared, jerked his head toward the office. She followed. No words. When she returned, her face was eerily calm, but her hands, the knuckles white as bone, betrayed the war that had just taken place in that silent room. By the end of the shift, most had left. Ethan stayed. He knelt beside Sam, scrubbing a blackened pot with a worn-out sponge. The neon light reflected on the water in the sink, making Sam's face ripple like an image in shattered glass. "You've got familiar eyes," the old man rasped, breath tinged with old cigarettes and thin coffee, like the old boss. He paused, looked toward the kitchen. If he saw this place now, he wouldn't just shut it down. He'd burn it to the damn ground. Ethan said nothing. He only tightened his grip on the pot's handle. Soap suds slid to the floor like dirty snow. Outside the restaurant's neon lights shimmered on the glass door like a plastic crown, glittering but hollow. Sam's words lingered in the air, "Burn it to the ground." And Ethan, standing in the dark, knew the fire had already begun to smolder. Some changes aren't announced with drum rolls or sirens, but with small details, a nod, a chilled water bottle placed at just the right time, a pair of gloves appearing where no one asked, but everyone needed. That's how Ethan, or rather Leo, began. He didn't talk. He observed. And when necessary, he acted. A new pair of rubber gloves was quietly placed by Sam's sink. A cold bottle of water was waiting beside Elena's salad station before the dinner rush. A timely catch when a young cook dropped a tray of prepped vegetables from trembling hands. No one said thank you. But everyone knew. And in a place where words had lost their value, action was the last remaining currency of survival. Elena never asked who he was, but every time she passed, she gave a single nod, crisp, decisive, like acknowledging a fellow soldier in the trenches. One late night, Ethan saw her sitting alone in the alley behind the restaurant. Her back was against damp brick, her head slightly bowed. The streetlight revealed eyes that were red but never hollow. She was reading, a worn-out textbook on restaurant management, its spine frayed, its pages thin like aged skin. Ethan hadn't meant to speak, but the slow turn of the pages felt like an unspoken question. "I thought you were a chef," he said. Elena didn't look up. "I thought so too," she replied, then paused. "But then my kid asked me, 'Mom, are you going to make salad for the rest of your life?'" The words dropped like a pebble but echoed in Ethan's mind far longer than he expected. Elena closed the book and looked at him. "I saw an old video. Ethan Cole. He talked about honor, about the taste of truth. That's why I applied to Aurelia." She let out a laugh, but there was no joy in it. "I thought this was where dreams began. Turns out it's just a wall painted gold." Ethan turned away, pretending to clear his throat. His eyes stung. Not from the wind, not from smoke, but from himself. Every word Elena spoke felt like acid on his skin. There used to be ideals. There used to be fire. Now only ash remained, and that ash clung to the woman standing before him. Saturday night. The restaurant was packed like an Easter Sunday church. Tables had been booked weeks in advance. Each dish had to fly out like artillery fire. Ethan stood at the dish station, but his eyes never left the kitchen. A ticket was pinned up, red letters, scrawled but unmistakable: nut allergy, severe, table 12, child. Ethan immediately looked up. So did Elena. The head chef, Preston's favored pick, who barked orders like a drill sergeant, was using tongs to plate almond cookies. Without changing utensils, he turned and used the same tongs to serve fries for the second dish, meant for the child at table 12. No one heard Ethan scream inside his head. No one saw Elena slide her salad tray aside. But in a single breath, she moved like an arrow. As the server approached the table with the dish, Elena darted an arm, swinging, knocking the plate from his hands. The shatter of ceramic echoed across the dining room like a slow, detonating bomb. The mother screamed. The child burst into tears. The entire restaurant froze for half a second, as if witnessing an assassination at a wedding reception. Preston appeared. He didn't walk. He materialized. "Are you out of your mind, Ramirez?" he snarled, just restrained enough not to spit. Elena panted, eyes fixed on the shattered plate. There were nuts. That dish could have had nuts. Preston turned red like a pizza oven at full blaze. "You just destroyed a $50 dish and terrified a guest. You're not a hero. You're a liability. You're fired. Get out. Now." No one moved. No one laughed. Elena stood amidst the shards, back straight, lips pressed into a line. She didn't cry, but the silence around her roared like a windless storm. Ethan stood at the kitchen threshold. He didn't look at Preston, didn't look at Elena. His eyes landed on the pair of tongs resting on the counter, almond glaze still clinging to the tips. Ethan's hand clenched not into a fist, but into a decision. He removed his apron and stepped into the locker room. The phone in his locker sat silent, as if it had been waiting for him since the beginning. He dialed without hesitation. "Prep the jet," he said, voice cold as steel. "I'm coming home, and I want my legal team ready. Before sunrise." Sunday. Chicago was cold and clear, as if the entire city had been wiped clean with vodka and a linen cloth. Outside Aurelia's entrance, a sleek black sedan rolled to a silent stop. The car door opened, and Ethan Cole stepped out. Not Leo, not a shadow in the kitchen, but the heir to an empire, the son of the man who once lit the first flame in an old New Jersey kitchen. He wore a charcoal gray suit, the collar pinned with a small gold emblem, a stylized fork, the original logo of Aurelia sketched by his father on a napkin 4 decades ago. He pushed the door open. No announcement, no music, no microphone. Inside, Preston Vance was in the midst of a staff meeting. His voice droned like an alarm clock. "We need to ensure the customer experience. Lighting should be soft. Entrees must not exceed a 14-minute wait. Wine should be poured at the correct angle." The sentence was sliced by a strange silence. A quiet wave passed through the room. He turned and saw Ethan. Preston's smile faltered for half a second. Then he shifted tone like a piano being tuned too fast. "Mr. Cole, what an honor. If I had known you were coming, I would have prepared." Ethan didn't answer, didn't look at him. His eyes swept the entire room, then landed in the far corner, where Elena Ramirez was packing her personal belongings into a flimsy cardboard box. Her back was slightly hunched. Her shoulders no longer held as high as the day before. Ethan walked over. In slow motion, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not going anywhere, Ms. Ramirez." The room froze. Preston smiled, but his lips twitched. "I'm sorry, sir. This situation." Ethan turned, looking him straight in the eye for the first time since walking in. His voice was steady. "For the past 3 days, he said I was Leo." That sound, that name, hit the air like a stone, splitting it in half. Eyes widened. A spoon clattered to the floor. No one picked it up. Preston stammered. I can explain." Explain. Ethan's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was precise. "Explain how you nearly poisoned a child because you didn't switch tongs after plating almonds. Explain why cheap oil, spoiled fish, and old wine are sold under the name of a legacy. Explain why my father's oath now lies under a walk-in freezer." He pulled out a folder, not a threat. The truth. Black ink on white paper. Photos, reports, witness statements, and finally footage from Saturday night's security camera. The tongs, the almond glaze. No fast forward, no edits. Ethan laid the folder on the table. "You didn't just break standards. You betrayed Aurelia. You betrayed me. And you betrayed the man who built this with burn-scarred hands and a heart full of belief." He touched the gold pin on his lapel. "This used to be a promise. Now it's a verdict." 2 plainclothes men stepped forward. No introduction needed. Corporate security. They flanked Preston. One said quietly, "Vance, please come with us." Preston let out a weak chuckle. This is absurd. It was just tongs, a plate, a misunderstanding. Ethan no longer looked at him. He simply said, "You picked the wrong dish, the wrong person, the wrong one to underestimate." Preston was escorted out like a man borrowing a suit 3 sizes too large. Ethan turned back to face the staff. His eyes met theirs one by one. "The mistake was mine. I took my eyes off the trenches. I trusted the wrong man, and you've had to live in the shadow of that decay." He walked over to Sam. Sam Jones. The old man paused. As of today, you're the cultural advisor of Aurelia, Chicago. Your job makes sure no one forgets why this place exists. The old man said nothing, but for the first time his hands stopped trembling. Ethan turned to Elena. Ms. Ramirez, in front of the entire team, I offer you the role of General Manager of Aurelia, Chicago. And your full tuition for your hospitality program, I'll personally sponsor it. Elena didn't cry. She simply stood still. Then slowly she nodded a nod of someone who's fought long enough not to need praise, only justice. Ethan took off his suit jacket, removed his cufflinks, rolled up his sleeves. Now he said, we have a restaurant to clean and a lunch to serve. Who's ready to start over the right way? No one moved for 3 seconds. Then a young cook, the same one Ethan had once helped, stepped forward. Then another, and another. Like a dam breaking, the kitchen came alive. But this time it wasn't chaos. It was a purpose. Ethan picked up a clean white apron. Flour, wine, and the old ashes of the old fire would now be replaced by the scent of a beginning. The light from the window spilled in like dawn. Not the light of a new day, but the first light after a very long night. 6 months later. A Wednesday afternoon in Chicago. The wind still whistled through old alleyways, carrying the scent of toasted bread and car horns blending with music from a corner bar. Aurelia stood there like a gem that had been polished, not blinding, but gleaming just enough to draw the eyes of those who once doubted. Ethan Cole walked in like any ordinary guest. No assistant, no cameras, no name on the reservation list. He chose a table in a quiet corner where sunlight from the window cast just enough glow to see the entire room without letting anyone see him. Before him was a scene that felt familiar, yet so changed, it made him squint. A young head chef, once the boy who trembled with a knife, now confidently led the kitchen line, without needing a hand to hold. Sam Jones sat at the bar, a coffee cup in hand, watching like an old general no longer in battle but still on the front lines. He was teaching a new staff member how to polish a wine glass until it doesn't reflect the light, but reflects respect. And then she appeared. Elena Ramirez, no longer the girl at the salad station. Her management uniform was tailored to perfection, as if she had designed it herself. Hair in a neat bun, low-heeled shoes, nothing flashy. But each step carried the weight of someone who had once been thrown out and chose to return with honor. She moved from table to table, speaking to guests like a true host. No bowing, no forced charm. She simply looked people in the eye, and somehow every customer smiled before she walked away. Not because of her words, but because of a feeling, I'm safe here. Ethan ordered no secretary, no fake name. He chose the branzino, the same dish Elena had once thrown in the trash, a dish that nearly became the symbol of a rotten ethic. And now it had become something else. A final test. The dish arrived, carried by a boy of about 17, acne still on his cheeks. Grilled branzino, charred lemon Tuscan white beans, he said slowly. Not overly confident, but sincere. Ethan took a bite. Steam rose like an apology. The fish was delicate, the skin crisp, no trace of excess oil. The beans were rich, but not heavy. Everything was in balance. But what made Ethan pause wasn't the flavor, it was the honesty. The dish didn't try to impress. It simply was, and that was enough to feel sacred. Elena approached the table. She wasn't surprised to see him, but still she asked, her voice as light as wine poured at the perfect angle. Is everything all right, Sir? Ethan set down his fork. Looked up. More than all right. It's exactly what it's meant to be. Elena didn't smile broadly, she just tilted her head slightly. No, sir, she corrected. This is only the beginning. They both fell silent. Not an awkward silence, a shared one, like two old soldiers standing atop a wall rebuilt from the rubble. At the next table, a young family was dining. The boy, around 6, kept staring at the open kitchen. His eyes lit up like a child watching fireworks for the first time. Ethan followed his gaze. The boy was pointing at Elena and asking his mother something. The mother nodded. The boy smiled, then returned to his meal, but his eyes stayed fixed on the place where dreams begin, with the smell of onions and flour. Ethan stood up, leaving a tip. No need to check the bill. No need to check the reports. Because the true harvest isn't found in quarterly profits or cost analysis charts. It's found in the laughter around a dinner table, in the eyes of staff who no longer carry fear, and in the dreams of a child when he looks into a kitchen and sees himself. Aurelia had been saved, not by money, not by strategy, but by the courage of a woman who was once fired for doing the right thing, and the return of a man not to reclaim power, but to redeem a legacy. That legacy now lived not in picture frames, but in every plate served with truth in its flavor.